And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Night Live. We're without stalwart Peter. Don't know where Peter is. Peter, if you're around, get on. And Nikki, who's having a night of culture tonight in the interests of her study, so we'll give her a pass. But in their place, apart from Macca, g'day Macca, how you doing?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate.
We actually have some sanity introduced into the podcast, and we've got Scorpus tonight. How you going, mate?
Oh, yeah, not too bad. Always love the trade period, so it's good to come on and do a little bit of a recap of that with you guys.
Yeah, well, as we were saying beforehand, it's probably a good thing you're here. So, look, we might know Nikki, but I'll just play Nikki's intro music and we'll just get into the news, eh? All right, so in the absence of Nikki, there hasn't been a huge amount going on. I think probably off the top of my head, the recent admission by Port Adelaide that they'll be playing Gold Coast again, and funnily enough, they don't care whether Gold Coast wear their home or away Guernsey this time around. Just wondering whether Rucci and Corns are going to hop on Twitter and call them hypocrites and liars.
Oh, of course not.
I wouldn't think so. No, not the triumvirate. You've got to throw Treadray into that too.
Yeah, Treader's only some of the time when it's a bit of a slow news week, Corns and Rucci in particular. But, yeah, so, and I think the only reason the Gold Coast are going up there is because they don't have a ground for the first 11 weeks of the season next year, so they've got nothing much else to do, so they may as well go on a bit of a junket. But Port clearly not so concerned about things this time around, whether they're just resigned to it not being as lucrative as they thought, or whether they realise that no one gives a stuff over there about who Port Adelaide is anyway.
That might be the truth. That might be the real thing.
Yeah. In other news, the Tits Out medal saga, post grand final medal saga, the investigation has been dropped. I'm a bit disappointed about that.
Well, I've got to say, is it clearly correct to say they were a fine set?
Come on, Macca.
They were.
I believe it's the woman herself has requested the investigation to be over.
Correct. That's why I feel it wasn't completely correct to make the comment.
Oh, well, I mean, I think, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And without getting into a social bloody commentary, she had a picture taken in good faith. There are some saying that, it's victim shaming to say that she shouldn't have put herself in such a vulnerable position. Others are saying that, if you're going to allow someone to take a nude picture of you, then you've got to accept the risk that comes along with that. But was it a storm in a teacup, really?
I don't know. No, being politically correct now, I do think it's very wrong what the guy did, sending it around to all his mates.
No doubt.
Because what happens between a couple in good faith, that's where it should stay.
I just find it a bit interesting that there was even this big investigation into it, because everyone, it's kind of an open secret at this point who took the photo, and on top of that, it's kind of, it's out there now, and it's very, very difficult for, that action to be undone. The photo will always be out there, and if they already know who is involved, I'm not really sure what was ever going to come of it.
Has it ever been confirmed whether the owner of the breasts was the same person as the owner of the butt cheeks?
Yeah, apparently so.
Yeah, it's not a phrase I ever thought would be on this cast.
Well, that's what you can do when Nikki's not around. G'day, Pete.
Evening, gents. I might just jump in. Sorry to be late for the cast this evening. A few issues. Just hearing you talking about this, but I assume we've covered the fact that she would have been, this girl quite clearly has been unofficially compensated for this. And
well, that was
have we discussed that?
Not yet, but that was the next. That was the next thing.
That is the absolute the pointer there is that all of a sudden she wants it withdrawn, and she brings it to the attention of the police, and I would suspect that she's been a nice yellow envelope that's gone her way, and all of a sudden it's all dropped. That would be my take.
Yeah, I think you're spot on the money, Pete. She didn't seem too concerned about the picture being taken in the first place, and that's not to victim shame because she still deserved the right to privacy. But I think you're right. I think that's been the outcome.
Unofficial litigation, we call that.
Yeah. In other news, next year we're going to have a Tuesday night game, pre-Anzac Day. Anzac Day must fall on a Wednesday this year, and we're having a Anzac Day Eve match between Richmond and Melbourne. They're calling it a blockbuster. I suppose it's half a blockbuster with the reigning premiers.
Yeah,
that's a fairly traditional game now. I think Richmond and Melbourne own that pre-Anzac Day or Anzac Day Eve match that's been in place for a couple of years, and I guess the fact that the day actually falls on a Wednesday means that it's an odd sort of a Tuesday night game. But I think they have owned that slot now for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, there was an article in the Advertiser, and I don't know whether it's today or yesterday, which I thought had a lot of merit, which said that, why is it that all these blockbusters are in Melbourne and by both teams are Victorian-based clubs? And because it just gives them an advantage that the other teams don't have.
We could do a whole podcast series on the inequities of the competition, Macro, I reckon.
Easily.
It's no surprise that there's, if it wasn't for the derbies and the showdowns, there wouldn't be much going on outside of Victoria. And yet we still get $50,000 a week or a match. So, I guess if it's not broke, they don't really have to have a look at fixing it, do they?
Well, I think that actually is part of the downfall, really, isn't it? Because of the fact that their argument would be, well, you don't need it.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Never mind. What else have we got here? We've got... I can't think of anything else, really, that's been going on. Anything else?
A couple of delistings by the Bombers. One of the guys, Ben Howlett, he was one of the guys that was stood down because of the drugs situation. And now he's got back on the list. He's got cut anyhow, so a bit of a cruel life for him. And Craig Bird, who used to be a Swan, and I always thought a reasonably good player, but... He got transferred down to Essendon a year or two ago, and he's been cut off Essendon just now as well.
A bit disappointing it wasn't announced at the Club Champion Award. I would have thought that they would, be a little bit more attentive. And a big shout out to Lee Gaskin.
Yeah. Oh dear. You're on
Sorry,
fire
that's
tonight,
just a bit of
Pete.
a swipe at some of the ridiculous crap that went on. Some of the ridiculous Anti-Crows reporting. That was one of the more ludicrous tweets that Lee put out. And I know that he listens to the cast. Lee, it was a shocker, mate. To actually try and pile in on the Crows just because all the media were, with really quite a poor tweet there, just suggesting that we've done fairly poorly by our delistees by not announcing them at the Club Champion Award. I mean, really? No club does that.
I was going to say, has anyone in the history of Australian rules football ever announced delistings at the best and fairest night?
No, it was just the greatest attempt at piling on with the rest of the media I've ever seen.
Yeah, it often happens the very next day after the best and fairest.
Yeah, so the other thing is, and there's been a little bit of scuttlebutt about this, but it's pretty much confirmed now that we're going to have live pick trading next year at the draft.
Yeah, just for my education and probably anybody listening that doesn't quite fully understand it, do you have it totally under control, Phoenix or Scorpus?
Oh yeah, we're actually sitting at the table, helping JR out.
We're buggered.
Well, it's unclear because it's hard to know how it's going to work. Our system's not as fluid as the NBA, which is what it's modelled on. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how it works. I don't know whether it's right. What do you think, Scorpus?
I think he's just nicked out.
Oh yeah, he's just muted himself, which means no comment. Pete, have you got a comment?
Look, I would if I understood how it actually is going to work. I'm a bit like Macca. I'm just not quite sure how it's going to work. Do I assume, or do we assume that they're just going to extend, in effect, extend the trade period so that they can be trading their draft picks on actual draft night? Is that how it works?
That's what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, simplistically, yes. So I think from what I've read so far, it'll be at the beginning of each round, but or whether it's just before the draft. It's basically live. So at any time, like if you go in the NBA system, essentially at any time a club can swap picks with another club. So, but obviously you've got to do it before the earliest pick in that swap has been reached. So, to me, it's unnecessary. To me, there's too much of a focus on bloody Americanizing the system, but we haven't actually tailored it to our own game's need and our own country's needs. And I think, Pete, you and I have talked about this before. We've taken certain elements of the system over there and applied it, like free agency. But then on the other side, there's no balance on the other side. So I don't know. I think it's unnecessary.
I don't see a point to it. I think that it just seems to me that there is just a continual push by the AFL to add bells and whistles to the off season to continue attracting and keeping themselves in the media. And this just seemed to me like another few bells and whistles to try and add a little bit of drama to the off season to keep people plugged in. We know how they do it. We know we've got trade, followed by the fixture is the next bit of news, and then to the draft, and then the preseason. And so, really, they're never out of the news. And it would be interesting to speak to a list manager and say, look, really, what are the, in a technical sense, what are the benefits that can be derived from the live trading of picks on the actual draft night? I'd be interested to know. Doesn't seem apparent to me, but I think it just seems to me to be adding a little bit more drama.
Yeah, the other nice summary there, Pete, and I think it is something that they want to add just to make the whole thing bigger and better, so that you can attract more headlines, take up more news space, and keep the AFL under the spotlight, even though it's not the footy season.
And as DSG points out on the chat, they have 2 or 3 weeks of trading and free agency and all the rest of it, and it all still comes down to the last bloody hour. How are they supposed to make a decision in bloody 30 seconds or a minute and get it signed off and ratified and all that? I think it's actually going to make the draft stretch out into a bloody 4-hour saga that no one's going to be interested in. I mean, they love the hoopla in America. It's a big event, draft day, and people turn up and people tune in. I couldn't give a rat's ass. I just want to know who Adelaide get, and we move on.
Yep, I'm in the same camp as you. The other stunning piece of news that we received was that Port Adelaide are getting 15% of Jack Watts' salary paid for by Melbourne, and why not? They're parasites. They leech off of everybody, so they might as well get paid by Melbourne as well.
Gee, how badly did Melbourne want to get rid of Jack Watts? It's the kind of thing that if Adelaide had done that to a favoured player, we would have been in the media for weeks, and there would have been probably a Senate inquiry. But given the fact that it was one of the traditional Melbourne clubs, there wasn't a lot of attraction, media attention, I should say, to it. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal the way they dealt with Jack Watts.
Pick 31 and $75,000 a year. That's telling someone you love them, isn't it?
just get the hell out of our football club.
Oh God! I mean, I wonder who drove that. I wonder if it was Simon Goodwin, because Goodwin was the one that made it difficult for him this year. I mean, last year Watts came 6th in their best and fairest, and he rocked up in less than optimal condition at pre-season, and Goody's basically not giving him a look in.
Yeah, and actually, well, I think Pete summed it up well. I thought he was virtually vilified by the club, and not just by one person. Who's that little character that used to play for Port Adelaide? He's their footy manager,
Marnie.
Marnie, yeah, he was quite. I thought what he said was quite nasty the way he spoke about him. And
this Melbourne CEO came out today and said, I'm not sure it was today or yesterday, but came out on Twitter saying, he's just not a ruthless player. I mean, that's just not necessary.
But he's too nice.
Well, not every player on your list needs to be a bulldog. I mean, we've got a bloke on our list, Josh Jenkins, that is probably seen in a similar light to Jack Watts. His output is probably better from a scoreboard perspective, but Jenkins is still seen in a similar light to Jack Watts, and yet I couldn't see our club. If they did want to trade Jenkins out, I couldn't see our club going down that road in terms of the rhetoric that was in the news.
I thought it was disgraceful, but I think that Goody's going to be a very, very hard man as a coach, and I think this is just an extension of that. I think.
Well, that's all well and good when things are going well and they're on the up, but that can also lead to division. They can be very divisive characters. I mean, you've got Nathan Buckley, who's a very meticulous and driven sort of a bloke and doesn't stand anyone that's outside of the box. Rossi Lyon is another who, is very staid in his ways and doesn't tolerate people stepping out of line too much. It's all right when they're going all right, but as we've seen with Buckley, you can divide a playing group very quickly, and that takes a long time to repair.
Yeah, you're right. Because if you make a habit of doing things like that, and then when the things start to go bad, the wheels really tend to drop off.
Hey, look, watch this space. I think you're spot on, Fiend. Watch this space with Melbourne because they really escaped scrutiny with how they perform in the trade period. And when you consider what they've obviously paid to get Jake Lever, and if you are if you're a member of the Melbourne playing group and you don't have your head around the intricacies of how the salary cap is managed, really all you're seeing is a popular member of the playing group, a contracted member of the playing group pushed out, effectively salary dumped, and then you've got this other bloke coming in who's obviously on quite big money, and the younger guys like Oliver and Petraka, as we were given to understand, are sort of on the low 300s, and that's not good for a playing group. And I think you're spot on. It's divisive, and it doesn't take much for the younger members of that playing group to put two and two together. And even if as a matter of accounting they're not related, the perception to the players has got to be that you've got to move one on for the other. And so I'd be interested to see how they gel next year.
Just on players, clubs chipping in to pay the salaries of players that have been moved on. Port Adelaide with Lobie, he was on about $500,000 a year or some ridiculous figure like that, and he had still some time of that contract to go. Have we heard whether Port Adelaide are contributing any money towards that?
200,000, according to PJ Crows on the chat.
Wow, 200,000 a year.
Yep.
Just to get rid of a guy. That's fantastic work.
What a stuff up by their list management.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, 200 sounds like a lot, Macca, but they're saving 300 a year.
Well, they should never have given him 500 in the first place.
Oh, of course not. But you think about it, they had, what do you have, another 2 years to go? So you got $1 million wrapped up in an SANFL ruckman, or you can spend $400,000 and free up 600 to go towards a Tommy Rockcliffe. It's probably it's not righting the wrong, but it's probably making the best of a very bad situation.
I don't remember reading anything about this from Rucci or hearing anything about it from Kane Corn.
No, of course not. Of course not.
No, it's the same reason there was no publicity about the Melbourne Watts Lever triumph. It's just the media have their darlings, and that's it.
Well, they also have their whipping boys as well, Pete. And
exactly.
I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago that I think the media have held their guns in their holsters over the last couple of years because of all the tragedy and unrest that's enveloped our club. But I think it's almost like us losing the grand final, and a bit of the rhetoric around the grand final has popped the cork. And I think the media as a collective have decided that 2 years is enough of leaving Adelaide alone, and now it's back to usual transmission. And what disappoints me is that even the South Australian media decide that that's the way to go. It's so difficult to get balanced reporting in South Australia, and it's not bad enough that we have to put up with a Victorian bias in the national media and the Victorian media, but even our local hacks go to the lowest common denominator and decide that it's easier just to muckrake rather than actually do some decent reporting.
Beautifully put.
I know that it's difficult, Macca, when blokes don't get their calls answered, and it doesn't matter how much Michelangelo says that he hasn't got a fractured relationship with the club. We know better, don't we? So, I guess there's got nothing else to write about.
They don't want to know him. I mean, seriously, they don't want to know him because the guy's done nothing but use poison pen against us from day one. So why would we give him stuff?
No. So, I mean, it's disappointing that even the local lads, we can't get some quality out of them, but I guess that's what we're here for, isn't it?
Well, exactly right. And the way that it's run, we obviously have media commentators that are all along local divided lines, the Port media and the Crows media. But while the Port media are quite happy to be critical and troll, for want of a better term, there seems to be this expectation, and it's an accepted expectation by the, for want of a better term, Crows media, that they have to give a balanced view and love both teams. And so, but anyway, look, we've spoken about this at length, and they just they've just got to be ignored.
Yep, and I think you're exactly right, Pete. And the fact that we're still around and we're still kicking, and our listener base is growing, and we're expanding our shows again next year. Between us and a few other podcasts around and some reporters on the fringe. I'd love to get Kim Dillon on here. I reckon he's the only bloke that's any good in South Australia at the moment.
Yeah, he's pretty good. I like Kimbo.
Good value. Very good. No, good value.
So I guess we should get on to what we did at trade time. We obviously did the big one, the Gibbs for pick 10, and then a downgrade of our pick 16 into the 2018 draft to what looks like probably being around about 22. And then a downgrade of our third and fourth rounders as well. So despite the reports, it wasn't 2 first rounders for Gibbs. It was 1 first rounder and a bunch of downgrades. How did we see that one, guys?
I think it's a difficult one in the sense to get a true answer on, in the sense that if Adelaide wins the premiership while Gibbs is within the next 4 years while he's playing, it's going to be a brilliant move. And what we paid is cheap. And if we don't make grand finals and don't win anything, then I guess people will say they wasted their time.
I think it was quite good for us overall. I think, if he was uncontracted, I think pick 10 by itself is probably a bit high. But when you look overall at the fact that he was contracted for an extra couple of years at Carlton, and you had the fact that the 2018 draft is supposedly a stronger draft, the ability for us to essentially swap our pick 16 for Carlton's very early second round pick, those 2 picks are probably going to be roughly equivalent in terms of the quality, and a similar thing for our 2018 second round pick going to their 2018 third round pick, very similar picks there. So that being the bulk of the deal, getting Bryce Gibbs for essentially pick 10 is probably a better outcome than I was expecting going into the trade period.
Yeah, that's probably a fair comment. It's still paying a good amount for a player who he's a good player, but he's not in the very say like the top 10 players or anything like that. And I mean, when you look at the fact that Hawthorn they got their man for pick 13, and he's the leading kick getter in the competition. So I think we've paid full tote odds, but it isn't quite as bad as it looks on paper. I agree with you because of the 2018 situation.
I thought we had an excellent trade period. I was really happy with it. And the reason I was really happy with it is because I felt that Justin achieved quite a nice balance in terms of recruiting for the now and to assist in a tilt next year. And I don't think that we can be, if we don't win a flag next year, I don't think we can be criticised for picking up a couple of ready-made midfielders to play. I think that I do think we could be criticised if we didn't make the grand final and we didn't do that. I think that you've just got to have a go, and I don't think anybody will. I certainly wouldn't be critical of the club if we didn't make the final, because I'd feel comfortable that we tried to do something in this trade period to get ourselves across the line for next year. But I thought that was really well balanced with achieving really, really good outcomes for Lever and Cameron. And what that meant was that even though we played off in a grand final this year, we've ended up with a pick 12 this year, and we've also ended up with 2 first-round picks next year in what's supposed to be a strong draft. And if we add in our 2019 first, we can say that we can be armed effectively with 3 first-round picks for 2018. And obviously, as Feen mentioned, that upgrade of our second to what should be, a pick around a sort of 2021, 22 mark. So, given the fact that we've also got 3 first-rounders running around in the SNFL that really should push through this year, another first-rounder this year, that's 4, and then picking up another couple of really 2 or 3 kids in the top 20 next year. I reckon that really, what's that, 3, 6, 7 first-round players. It's a lot of talent to bring in 2 years. It really is. And I think to be able to achieve that and to have also got something for the now, I think is a great result. I want to throw a question to everybody, though, which I think is interesting, is that I thought it was a really, really strong result, this trade. It wasn't strategic in the sense it wasn't something we really sort of planned for per se. It was forced upon us by having to trade out Lever and Cameron. And without those walkouts, we wouldn't have achieved that balance that we did. And yet, to me, although being good players, they're not. I don't see them as being structurally critical players. I think they're replaceable. I'm just wondering. We see other clubs, trade aggressively. Clearly, we wouldn't have got this result if those 2 players had stayed. Do you think that this could possibly influence the way that we look at the trading period in the future?
It's a really interesting question, Pete. I mean, you're dead set right. I mean, there's been a school of thought that we're a year late on the Gibbs deal and that it may or may not have been the difference to winning a flag in 2017. It's probably overstating Gibbs's importance, but there's no question that it would have given us a stronger midfield, and it would have been at the expense of Jordan Gallucci and pick 16. And you're right. Had Charlie hung around and had Jakey hung around, then we would have had pick 16 this year. And you would imagine, given our desire to get into the 2018 draft or be involved in the 2018 draft, that the Bryce Gibbs deal wouldn't have eventuated. And I think the proof of that is the fact that Carlton and Adelaide didn't really speak until the Friday of the first week of the draft period, when it became quite evident that we were going to have some currency. But as a result, as you rightly point out, we're in a fantastic position. We've been able to achieve some real list balance that we haven't had for a while. And it was very decisive once the opportunities arose. But had Cameron and Lever stayed, we wouldn't have Gibbs. And then you've got to ask the question, where would we have been in terms of our chances for 2018? So who knows? They might sit around at the end of at the wash-up after draft and go, well, shit, here are some benefits of being more aggressive at trade, and maybe this is the way to go.
I think if it comes down to, Lever has indicated that he wants to stay, it's not going to be a situation where in the future we would still look at trading him out for maximum value. I think if he wanted to stay, it would certainly be in the team's best interest to retain him. But we certainly have made the most out of a pretty poor situation with those players wanting to leave. That said, I would still have traded Charlie Cameron regardless. I think his value at the moment is at its absolute maximum, so we're able to get a very good return there. But making the best out of a bad situation has allowed us to, as you say, gain players that are necessary to keep us at the pointy end of the ladder and restructure our list in such a way that we lose from an area that we're sort of stronger in terms of our forward line defense, and we're able to put that into the midfield where we need more quality, and also retain those key picks, because we seem to have this strategy of continuing to want picks in every first round of every draft. And yeah, I'd be very surprised if we didn't lose Lever in particular. I don't think we would be getting a Bryce Gibbs this trade period. We would have kept our high picks, I reckon.
Well, I reckon Pete did a very good summary before. I think that while I was saying that we paid a pretty good price for Gibbs, when you look at the package, we got a very, very good result overall. So that because we got way overs, I think, for Charlie and for Lever. And the other point that you've just been talking about, very, very valid indeed. We wouldn't have traded Lever. We would have kept Lever. But the fact that he's going from an area, and Scorpus just touched on that just then, he's going from an area where we have some strength in the sense that coming through, young Keith coming through, and on top of that, Dode, his time has come. He's got to stand up and he's got to be counted because he's a first-round draft pick and he's been here for 2 years running around the SAFL. So his time has come. So I believe that we can cover what we've lost in the back lines, and that makes Gibbs a total addition, if you look at it that way. And then with Charlie going, that means it'll force us to push Gallucci along a little bit quicker too. And I think that, as you said, I think it was Phoenix who said that we've actually been forced to do something that might be very, very good for the team overall, and might actually be one of the things that might give us a chance of winning the flag this year.
The interesting thing, Macca, is that what we've seen with being our hand almost being forced is what would happen if the trading laws were changed so that you could trade a player to any club without his permission, because even though we had to deal with clubs that were actually interested in our two players, both those situations were forced. And yet, as a consequence, I would argue, and I think this is Pete's point, that we're in a far better position than we were the day before trade week started, or trade period started. Now, the AFL want fluidity and lists, and they want, all teams in contention and all the rest of it. And having that ability to be aggressive at trade would be, really assisted by the ability to trade players to any club. And I think our trade period experience is an illustration of that, and it makes a mockery of all the trade ratings that we're all C or D or whatever, because we're in a far better position than had we not had those two players request trades.
Yep, I can't argue about that, and also then makes you think about, do we have the right philosophy, in the sense of some clubs are always quite prepared to trade away relatively good players because they have strength in numbers in those areas. E.g. Mitchell from Sydney down to Hawthorn. Well, the reason he was traded down there probably was the fact that, Buddy's getting $1 million and the other fellow, Tippett, he's getting paid a lot of money just to run around in the Sydney reserves. But, well, the clubs that tend to move out a good player tend to get another good player in there, and they probably strengthen the areas in which they are weak or have a real need for it. And, for example, we've got Atkins, for example. He's got good currency, but he doesn't always do the job for us, and he certainly doesn't generally do it for us when it really counts. And should we be more ruthless and trade people like that to try and get or talk them into a trade, and so that we can get other players that are more suited for what we need.
The problem is that
sorry, go on, Pete.
I was going to say the problem with, and I accept your point, Mark. He's a classic kind, but you probably, there's not many players that are going to attract 2 first-round picks, and also the fact that I guess really the line for us, and it may be a situation never replicated because you've also got Brisbane prepared to pay pick 12, and they're prepared to pay a premium, not just because he's contracted, but because inverted commas, he's from Queensland, and the value, and we saw that also with Gold Coast paying well over the odds for Weller. And the value to them is the fact of, like what Gold Coast would be saying, well, what's pick 2 really worth to us? When it's probably going to be, a Vic Metro kid that's going to go home in 2 years. We'd rather probably just spend it, and we know we're going to get probably 200 games out of Weller. So probably the planets aligned a little bit. A guy like Atkins is probably going to get you, probably a good second round pick. You're looking at, to get the kind of booty that we got, you're looking at some kind of exceptional circumstance, or someone in the really high echelon of players who are strongly in demand. And it may well be that this will never come around again, because I think Scorpus, you're absolutely spot on. Before trade week starts, you're hoping Lever stays, and you'd never willingly trade him off. But I guess it was just the way that the cards fell that we've really, in one foul swoop, I think, strengthened our team for a tilt next year. And by the same foul swoop, we've managed to put together a fairly good war chest of first round picks between this year and next.
I think when it comes to trading a player like Atkins, it's in the position that we're in. You really would only want to trade him if you were getting that was facilitating a player coming back to us. I think, as you point out, Pete, Atkins' value is probably only an early second round pick, and for us in our position, there's no point having that second round pick. Going to the draft with that, there's absolutely no point. Obviously, if you're a rebuilding team, you might look to get some more currency in the draft by trading out players like that. But for us, it's not really a sensible move. I think the only time you'd be looking to trade out players for picks and taking those to the draft is similar to the Charlie Cameron situation, where a team is willing to pay pretty clearly significant overs to get that player to their club, and that pick could very well not I doubt they'd have an impact right at the moment, but in the future they'll could potentially be a better player. So I think in the case of an Atkins or one of those other sort of middle tier sort of players, you'd really only want to move them on if you could guarantee getting some pretty significant overs, or that was facilitating some sort of other player coming in.
Yeah, well, what I had in mind when I made that comment was exactly the second point that you made, more about a player coming in. For example, and I'm not saying this is possible to have as a trade, but if it were possible that you could trade Atkins and maybe you have to add another draft pick to that, and you could bring in somebody like a Devon Smith who adds something to your midfield, but also very good around the goals and very good shot for goal as well. If you could move Atkins on and get a Devon Smith, you would definitely strengthen your team, in my opinion.
I think it's hard for us being in Adelaide to facilitate those sort of trades. If you're a Melbourne club, sure, you can trade around players all that you want. You can trade out your mid-tier players and get some better players in by just cycling through the 10 clubs that are in the general vicinity. But for us, we have that issue where there's a lot of players that want to go out that request trades, and I think it would be fairly easy for us if we wanted to move on players to get those players to go to their states that they come from. But on the other hand, getting a player back is probably a lot more difficult. And, if it comes down to looking at players to come in, and we've got an Atkins who we are thinking of moving on, unless we're using that in sort of a Bryce Gibbs type trade, there's not much point, and I don't think there's a lot of value that we could get coming back. Because a player like, as you mentioned, Devon Smith and a lot of the other players that moved clubs during this trade period, they're simply not going to want to come to Adelaide, unfortunately, and that really hamstrings a lot of our efforts getting players in.
That is the weakness in the argument. There's no doubt about that. So it would be a limited situation. It's not like we could do it on a wholesale basis, but if the opportunity arose. But as you said, it's going to be very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I think the stars really have to align to end up with a trade period as we had this trade period. I did just want to also acknowledge the trade for Sam Gibson. I thought that there was nothing wrong with that trade. I think for Pick, it was obviously just a kiss goodbye pick for North Melbourne to do the right thing by him and to ensure that he knew what was happening in his life and that he could actually pack his bags and make a plan for himself and not have to hang around till the pre-season draft. I think that was a good arrangement between the clubs to get him sorted, and I thought he was a good pickup. He's a guy that in the last 2 years has come third and sixth in the club champion award. I know that he's 30, he'll be 31 at the start of the season, but he has obviously been good football. The fabled 130 games in a row. He's obviously fit. He's obviously durable. And he's obviously been playing good football, and I'd be very, very surprised if he didn't make some kind of a impact on the first 22 next year. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the fact that he will only be depth. I don't think that would be what's in his mind. I think he would be thinking he's coming over here to play league football as he has been doing for the last 5 or 6 years without a break. So I'll be very interested to see what Sam Gibson brings to the club.
Well, one thing I can tell you he brings an endless tank. He can run forever. He's a very, very fit person who can just keep going and going, and he tries extremely hard, and he'll be a best 22 player for us, and he's not going to be best on ground, but he's going to be one of your better players every week because he just gives 100%. And he's got a couple of strings to his bow. He can play on the wing. He can play on a half-forward flank. He can play as a tagger, and he did a mighty job against Sloane, cutting Sloane out of the game when we played North Melbourne early in the season, and that he just tagged him right out the game. And so he'll definitely be a best 22 player. And I've always watched him closely because I've had him in my dream team at various times, and I like him as a player. I think he's going to be a good pickup.
I'm really torn on Sam Gibson trading him in because on first glance he fails my trade criteria, which is does the team, the supporters of the team that he's coming from rate him? And he's been a bit of a whipping boy for North Melbourne supporters over the past couple of years, mostly down to his disposal. So that's immediately raising some red flags. Obviously, I have no problems with the trade itself. Pick 91, probably not going to use that pick, so it doesn't really matter. But on the other hand, I think he brings a lot of qualities, as you guys have been mentioning. He's a very hard player. He's obviously had a very good record of playing consecutive games and finishing reasonably high in North's best and fairest. Even when they've been a club that's further up the ladder than they are at the moment, he's been ranking quite well in terms of positioning by the coaches. And we just have that a little bit of lacking of hardness in our midfield at times for some of our players. And I think Gibson, if he does make it into our best 22, and I have no doubt he will, what's the point of trading him in if we're not going to actually play him in our AFL team? I think he's just going to add that little bit of extra grunt and hardness. And, it's a rotation through the midfield. He can play on the wing. He's a tagger. He has all those strings to his bow. And, you look at him in his 31. Yeah, he might have been a whipping boy. But I think for such a bargain basement pickup, he probably could add something to our team.
Yeah,
Shane, what do you think?
Interesting one. I'm not quite sure where he slots in as a permanent best 22 player. I have a feeling that they're going to shift Douglas back to Brodie Smith's role. He trained there all last pre-season in preparation, and then things changed a little bit. So that's a spot that's going to be taken by Gibbs, you would imagine. He's probably a tagger. He may put some pressure on Rory Atkins in terms of a spot on the wing, or he may put some pressure on a David McKay for a spot across half back. That was almost obscene, Scorpus.
Whipping boy to whipping boy, mate. You've got to rotate the whipping boys, bring some new ones in, get the old ones out.
Yeah, to me, he looks a little bit like a horses for courses type. I think we might bring him in against certain midfields. Geelong springs to mind with their Fab Four now. Not bad to have a guy like Gibson come in and shut someone down. But I don't know whether he's best 22. But, a worthwhile trade, I think, for a bag of chips.
The other issue I have is that, what does this mean for one of our younger developing midfielders that we might be looking to play in our AFL team? Is a Gibson coming in, filling a role, is that preventing a player like Gallucci? I know he might have a spot, in Cameron's role. Is it preventing a Gallucci from coming in? Is it preventing us from playing a Miller or a Paholke or a, filling that position with Hampton, who we still have in the reserves, who's been injured a bit? In some cases, I'd probably prefer to see us go with our first round pick in a Miller or Gallucci or Hampton. We traded a second round pick for Hampton. We should probably be playing him. But on the other hand, Gibson, he's just a different player to some of those guys, and he's more experienced and so forth. So again, there's a lot of reasons why I'm a bit torn on this, but I hope it doesn't lead to Gallucci spending another full season in the SNFL.
Well, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point, and that is the other side of recruiting someone like Gibson, and that is that we should be looking to get game. And I think that we haven't. I don't think we've been great at it in the past of just saying, look, let's just get games into them. And Paholke actually had a very good season last season, and would certainly hate to see his development stagnate because of that. But I get the feeling that they feel, and I sometimes think this is a little bit dangerous, but I just get that feeling that they feel as though they're just one or two good players away from winning the flag, and so this is all aimed towards a major tilt at it next year.
I think. Sorry, Macca, just quickly. I think what we need to do next year is play these lads in games that we can afford to play them. Pikey's very much about best 22, consistency and continuity, but I think we need to get better at finding opportunities to give Gallucci and Paholke and these types games, against a Brisbane or against a Carlton, particularly early in the first half of the season. The way it's been going the last few years, it's very much who's in form at the end of the season. And you only have to be around the mark, somewhere around the top four to have a good crack at it. So we need to get better, I think, at rotating those lads through the team in games that we can afford to do so.
Yeah, you actually stole my line. That's where I was going. Mate. No, that's all right. That's where I was going to, in the sense, and I think there's four of them. Dodo in the back lines, Paholke, Gallucci, and Miller. They're four youngsters that we would really like to see develop this year, and that you throw in some stop in the sieve and some fall through, and then hopefully at least half of those four can become regular members in our side. And the only way they'll do that, of course, is to get games. So exactly what you said, Phoenix. When we've got a game against one of the lesser sides, well, they should definitely be in there and having a crack at it.
I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on the other trade that we did this trade period that we haven't talked about just yet, and that is actually managing to extract any value for Harrison Wigg. We've traded out pick 54 in our 2018 fourth round pick and managed to get pick 39 back for Wigg. That's an outstanding result for someone who I think has pretty much no value whatsoever and probably was going to be delisted anyway. To go in with that sort of pick is really good.
I was surprised because he was going to be delisted.
Yeah, well, that was my feeling, that they were going to wait until until list lodgement and see where he sat, and at best he was going to be depth, but we always knew he was on the nose when he wasn't getting selected a couple of times where he probably deserved to be. Getting that outcome for Wig is a real bonus and takes a bit of the pressure off in terms of picking up Jackson Edwards at this year's draft.
Yeah, the way I see it is we've got 12 for Charlie, and that's obviously going to be I know I'm not sure whether we're going to go probably a midfielder, I would think, but that may or may not be the case depending on what's available. I still think 39 will be a live pick too, in the sense that because they keep publishing we've got 4 picks, we've really got 5 because we played one short last year. So
yeah, that's right.
So we've really got 12 and 39 I see as live picks, 77 for Edwards, and then the last 2 picks in the hundreds, upgrading Keith and Greenwood. And do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, that was my assessment after looking at the draft. Our current position we have 6 players coming out. Lever, Cameron, Wigg, who we traded. We delisted Menzel and Gore, and we have Tomo as well, who retired. And coming in, we have Gibbs and Gibson, pick 12, pick 39, pick 77, 109, and 127. I think we probably will go with the full senior list this year, just looking at, I think pick 39, by all reports, is too high for Jackson Edwards, and I'd be very surprised if there was a bid on him before that point. So it probably will end up being pick 77 for him. What I'd be interested in seeing is whether we decide to delist another player and still go one short on the senior list, because if we do it as what Macca and I have been discussing, and go with the 3 live picks to pick 2 upgrades with Greenwood and Keith, and we delist another player, we'll still be that one short. We have, I believe at the moment, it's Cheney and Cameron Ellis-Yeoman as the 2 players from our senior list who are uncontracted at the moment, along with Hunter and Beach, I believe, on the rookie list.
Yep,
correct.
Can you guys see any of those being delisted, or will they both be retained, and therefore, we probably will go in with that full senior list?
Hunter's a possibility to drop off. I wouldn't be surprised if we went with one short again this season, only because with the way TPP management is now, we can actually bank a shortfall. And I reckon we might be doing everything possible to build up a nice little brown paper bag of cash for Rory next year.
Well, I want to chat about that.
And saving 150 grand or a couple of $100,000 on this season to pop in the kitty, I don't think would be a bad option.
Well, the thing, though, is that the rookie salaries are outside the salary cap until you upgrade them. So Hunter being a rookie player, and the same with Beach, delisting them will have no impact on our salary cap. So if we do come with that one short, it will have to be either Cheney or Ellis-Yeoman, and there could be some advantages there from a salary perspective. I expect both Hunter and Beach to be delisted. I think we've seen enough of Hunter, and Beach is just unfortunately not AFL quality.
I think they might drop a rookie off and delist Cameron Ellis-Yeoman and rookie him.
Yeah, potentially.
I think that might be the go. There's a little bit of chatter about Kyle Cheney's enthusiasm to go on. Have you heard any more about that, Pete, at all?
No, nothing. I do want to talk about a little conspiracy theory with Sloaney though, but when we can give me a second. But I haven't heard anything about old Fettuccine.
Yeah, I'd keep Jenny just in reserve in case we get injuries. That he's an experienced backman and he is a desperate type of player. So
I think it's more about his desire, Macca.
Right? Is there a question mark on it?
Unconfirmed reports. Can I just put it at that?
I think it'd be interesting if we do end up, shuffling out some of those players. Do we pick up another delisted free agent? There's a few around. I don't think there's many that are super high quality, but people have been mentioning players like, Trent McKenzie if he gets delisted, players like that. There's a possibility that we are looking into that. And, if Cheney doesn't have his desire to play AFL footy anymore, that might be a path that we explore.
Look, it's certainly possible.
Well, Mackenzie, that's the Gold Coast bloke who can kick the ball 100 miles. He's a reasonable player, and the other one too that got delisted by North Melbourne, and Aaron Mullet's not totally hopeless either. They're not probably best 22 players, but they're players that you've got in reserving in case something goes wrong. So we may do.
I reckon our depth's looking pretty good at the moment. I think this year's list management is very much about TPP management, because we've got some big signings coming up. Matty Crouch is another, I think, that's coming up next year, isn't he?
And Tom Lynch as well.
Yeah, so we need to have some money, and that's why I wouldn't mind betting that we do what I said before, and drop CEY out and rookie M up, and free up a bit of cash and go one short again. But Pete, I'm very interested in what you've just dropped there, so would you like to expand?
Well, just a bit of a conspiracy theory, mate. Now, you know that I dropped last week that I had very, very there's some very good information going around about Sloaney leaving at the end of next year, and subsequent to that, through the week, we obviously have heard from the guru herself, Caroline Wilson, and other reports that there is, and also from Justin Reid himself, about contract negotiations are in the works, and they expect something done reasonably soon. Let me put this to you as just a discussion point, because the source that confirmed that has got way too much right over the last 24 months to just discount that. So I'm going to stick with that. I still think that there's a significant risk that he goes at the end of this year. But let me put this to you. Let's just say we're faced with, and it is Adelaide, so we're faced with this never-ending situation where you're trying to have a run at a flag, and you've just got this constant media speculation about your star player going, which, of course, if he remains uncontracted and puts off talks, then, of course, that will only grow, and with the media as it is, that will plague us for the whole year. And also, if he then does go, of course, he leaves as a agent, and the likely compensation is in the first round pick, which is,
it'll be a
nothing.
pick after our pick, I reckon, for Sloaney.
Yeah. Well, and look, whichever way you want to slice that up, it's not going to be great, is it?
No.
So, what would you think then would be if you're creative, then potentially what you do is you get Sloaney on a massively 2-year deal, front-ended, so he gets a huge whack this year. So he gets a decent whack of dough in his last year, and then he goes to the trade table next year as a homesick player but contracted. And and a player of his quality, most likely guaranteeing to a club like trade to a club like St Kilda for 2 first-round picks. How do you think that plays out?
Well, it plays out fine, except that if you were to sign him up on a front-ended 2-year contract in his restricted free agent year, then effectively he Scorpus, you probably know better than me, but he doesn't he retain his free agency status then for the rest of his career? Is that right?
Do you say when he moves clubs?
No. If he hits restricted free agency next season, but he signs a 2-year extension with us. When his next contract is up, he retains his status as a free agent, doesn't he?
Yes, and he would become at that point an unrestricted free agent as well.
Exactly. So there's a risk there, Pete, that clubs might just hold off and say, "Well, we'll take him next year for nothing," which is what I think happened with Tom Rockcliffe this season.
Yeah, but that you're talking about, Sloaney as a superstar. And I accept that that's the risk to Sloaney, and he's well compensated for that. And maybe he does gets caught for another year. But I put that up as a potential, and it'll be interesting to see if or when he does sign, be very interesting to see the length of the deal and whether that it looks like it's an intended, this is the rest of your career deal, or whether just the thing that we see now with the AFL landscape is that contracts mean absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And in fact, all they do mean is really strong bargaining power. It's really it looks to me to be the only way that clubs can retain some kind of power.
Yeah. And we spoke about this earlier in the season, didn't we? With regards to changing strategy and using contracts as leverage.
Exactly. And I wonder with the information that I've heard, and I'm happy to back it. I'm happy to, say, look, I think he'll go at the end of next year. And I just wonder whether now getting him sorted for a contract just seems very, very weird that he wouldn't have done it when he said he was going to do it, which was midway through last year when Tex did it. And then all of a sudden here we are, start of end of this year, start of next year, and suddenly he wants to do it. We're going to roll out a contract. Seems just a bit odd to me. And I want.
Sorry.
No, go on.
I think there's a couple of factors that differentiate the Sloane situation from Tex. And the free agency status is one thing that I think his manager would have advised him to wait. And I think the other thing, and I have no information to back this up, but my own gut feel is that given there was a bit of scuttlebutt around about Sloane heading back to Victoria prior to trade week, that scuttlebutt was going around, and then following trade week or trade period, we've had one or two journos come out and say they'd be very surprised to see Sloane leave and that a contract signing isn't far away. I actually think our performance during the trade period has played a part in that. I think if we hadn't have, and this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the show about doing well, almost out of necessity. I think if we hadn't have landed Gibbs, and if we hadn't have done so well out of the Lever and Cameron trades, I think that would have been a negative for Rory in terms of how he saw the club's future going forward. But I think bringing Gibbs into that midfield and what that means for Rory's role and the amount of attention that Rory's going to receive, I wouldn't mind betting that that's played some role in him. At least I reckon he'll sign on for another 2 years, and he may go out. That'll take him to what, 30? I think.
I think he's only 26 or 7, isn't he?
Oh, he's a bit older than that, isn't he?
I think he's 27.
I thought he was 28 next season.
Yeah, he's 27 at the moment, so he will be 28 in March of next year. So I guess a 2-year contract will put him up to that 30 range. He might even be an unrestricted free agent this year, actually, considering he will be.
I thought he was an RFA, but I could be wrong. It could be a UFA. But anyway.
2009 is when he started playing, so what's that?
No, he's restricted.
9 seasons with the Crows? Is that restricted or unrestricted? I don't know.
It's 8 and 10, isn't it?
If he signs a 2-year deal, he is gone.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, Pete, at that point. Because really, if based on what we were talking about before with our list management and the fact that we're currently in the window, we've got a good core of senior players and we've got a young group coming through. Rory for 2 years really will see us through to, the lifespan of maybe Tex, maybe Daniel Talia, certainly blokes like Richie Douglas, Dave McKay, if he's still around, those sort of blokes. And the new breed will be coming up. Brad and Matt Crouch will be senior midfielders. Hopefully we'll have blokes like Gallucci and Greenwood running around. Bryce will similarly be just about done. So it's not a bad thing to have Rory for 2 and then try and we'll get compensation for him when he goes. I think it actually fits the strategy perfectly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm talking about end of next year. I'm talking about him leaving as a contracted player so that we end up with potentially 2 first-round picks to hit that 2018 draft on top of the booty that we've already got.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing is, it'll depend very much on what the outcome is of the 2018 season, I think. If he signs up now and we fall off a cliff in 2018, you're probably right. If we win one, he might go as well. But if we suffer another grand final loss or we're thereabouts, then that would probably see him hang around for one more season. But
can I just ask Pete the reason that Rory would like to leave?
It's his missus.
His missus, yeah.
Rory would stay, but it's Belinda that she's got a job in Melbourne, and she's done her time probably.
But that show that she's on is quite often produced in South Australia.
No, I think she's got another gig, hadn't she, Pete?
Well, that's my understanding is that the career's burgeoning, and she'll continue to work, but that's the word, is that she was certainly the driving force.
But she wants to go home.
Correct.
Well, cherchez la femme. Always look for the woman.
All right, we better sneak in a quick rumble. What do you reckon?
Well, we've got our normal candidates, haven't we?
Yeah, it's going to be a very quick one, but we'd be doing Nikki a disservice if we didn't shove one in quickly. My vote, Rucci, Corns, and that's probably about it.
Terry Wallace giving us a C for trade period when I thought it was one of the best trade periods we've had for a long time, and I thought we were sort of given the quality of what we got and where we the strength that has given our list. I thought it was a ridiculous assessment.
It's very simplistic, wasn't it?
And I'd like to nominate Nikki because she's not here to protest about it.
Scorpus, you get the opportunity.
Yeah, I'd nominate Port Adelaide again for apparently wanting to recruit Lindsay Thomas. Makes absolutely no sense.
Oh, that's a strong nomination.
Yeah, I like it.
Very
when in
strong.
doubt, give it to Port.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Very strong nomination. We're going to go with that. So why would they want Lindsay Thomas? Seriously.
Oh, I don't fucking know.
Well, haven't they got enough duckers already? They got Wingard and Gray.
They're assembling an Olympic diving team. That's what I reckon.
They're going to play off with Geelong in the final. Anyway, that just about does us, I reckon, guys. It's been a lively chat tonight, considering I wasn't sure whether we were going to make 45 minutes. Lots to talk about.
Oh, never in doubt.
Yeah, never a shortage of opinions with us. Thanks very much, Scorpus, for hopping in and adding us a voice of reason to the show in Nikki's absence.
Yeah, no worries. It's good to come on. I just want to quickly mention at the end that Lockie Weller for pick 2, one of the worst trades I've ever seen. So just a shocking. Don't know what was going on there, but yeah, good to be on.
Yeah, we didn't actually cover many of the other teams' trades, but who gives a shit? Pete, thanks for stopping by eventually, mate. Good to have you on board as usual.
Thanks, mate.
Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at AFL Crowcast. You can give us a rating and a like on iTunes if you like, if that's the way you listen to us. And that'll be us until the week before draft, at which time we'll probably pop on and do a bit of a pre-draft preview. We'll probably have Corey on for that because he's a bit of a guru there. And then we'll wind up the season with the post-draft analysis and see who we did and didn't take. And that'll do it. So a couple more to go, but a week or two break now until the draft preview. But until then, thanks everyone for your ongoing support for the year to date. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Keep an eye on Twitter and Facebook for the preview cast.
Yeah, 1 second, Phoenix. 1 second. Just want to come in because condolences to Hugh Greenwood and the Greenwood family for the loss of his mum. Very, very sad to hear that news breaking this morning, I think.
Yeah, very sad indeed. And our best wishes to Hugh there. I guess not unexpected, but it doesn't make it any better. All right, guys, that'll do us. Thanks very much. Thanks to everyone on chat for taking part, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Good night, all.
Yeah, good night, all.
Bye now.
Yep. Bye.